I'm just going to share the daf so that we could all see the daf. Daf Mem Zayin. Okay. Can you see the daf on the television?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so let's get started. We are about 6 lines on the top, Hachiyasha. So we had two very important shilas that really are what today's Gemara is based on. And that is, the Gemara had a shaila. We know that if you bow down to a mechubal karka, it does not become asur bana. You can't asur a mechubal karka. Alaharim elahem, v'loy haharim elahem. So the Gemara has a shaila. Okay, that's like a yes or no. But what about Lagabe making it a meshamish of a carbon? For instance, if someone bow down to a rock that will not become asur bana, can you take that rock, quarry it, pull it out, and make it part of the Beis Hamikdash? Do you say that since it's nevad, it can't even be a meshamish for kabbanis or not? That was the first trial. And then the Gemara said, if you're going to hold that would be a problem, that although it's not also no, it's not appropriate to use for a carbon, the Gemara says, let's have another shot. The other side will be, what if it was nishtana? What if it was nishtana? So someone bowed down to wheat that was growing in a field to come up. It doesn't answer it, it's mechuber. Then it got cut down and it was ground into flour. It was nishtana. Can you use that flour for a carbon mincha? That was the Gemara shayla. So the Gemara suggested to bring a raya from an animal that was nirba. The Gemara says that if an animal was pregnant and after it was pregnant became nirba, so technically the mother and the fetus was nirba. After that fetus is born, it's going to be usher to be brought out of the mizbeach. Zok to Gemara, that's a perfect example. The fetus was nishtana. It was first a fetus and now it's a behema. And nevertheless, it still remains also to be brought in the Mizbeach. Similarly, the wheat was nishtana, it became flour, but the balt was nevad. When it was tama, it should not be able to be allowed to be brought on the Mizbeach. And that takes us to today's Gemara, Hachiyashta, which is 5 lines from the top of the daf. Hachiyashta, Hasa meikara behema, v'hashta behema. The animal that was born, it was a behema while it was in the mother's stomach. And it's still a behema. The only thing that changed about it was deshahu dachizabakva. It was locked into the uterus, and then the gate opened up, and the animal got out. But there's not really a shino in the goof of the animal. But hacha meikarachiti v'hashta kimcha. The problem is here we have a real shino. It was once wheat kernels, stalks, and now it's flour. That's a much more change in the actual item. Maybe that would still be mutter. So therefore, our shaila remains unresolved. Would it be allowed to be brought as a mincha? Yes or no? Now, Tosfos points out that in some ways, soilas is not a shinui from chitin. Tosfos brings a raya from a Gemara that soilas is considered one and the same with chitin. And Tosfos says that shouldn't be considered a shinui. And Tosfos says we see it by esnan. And by Esnan, we see that the shinuyim are osir, but the v'lodeshem are mutter. So you see the opposite. So Dr. is there by Esnan. There's a different reason for it, but the point is important to note. When he says over there, the reason why v'lodeshem would not be part of it is the loinichale benafchai. They didn't make the vlad into an Esnan, because really that's a chasor in the fact that the animal's pregnant. It's a shiloh that's only relevant to Esnan, but in fact, lagabe being matter, it to be brought as a mincha, changing wheat, chitim into soilas is quite a shit. So now Rish Lakish takes us into another shiloh, again, according to Rashi, building upon what we've learned until now. Boy Rish Lakish, so we've already established there's a shiloh if you can bring something that was nishtana as a carbon, or something that was served when it was mechuber, can you bring it as a carbon? Now the Gemara says, let's say you can't bring it as a carbon, but can you use it as a dvar mitzvah? Boy Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish says the following shayla. Hamishtachava ledekel. If someone bows down to a dekel, which is a lulav tree, so of course it's mechober, it doesn't ask for vano. The question is lulavoi ma'u lemitzvah. Can you use? Oops, not that. Can you use? I don't have it. I don't have it. It must be in the car. It must be in the armrest because I cannot find it. Are you allowed to use its lulav for dvar mitzvah? So we established we have a suffix if you can use it as a carbon. Now the question is, can I use it as a dvar mitzvah? Ooh, one moment, please. I have my credit card in my pocket. One second. Sorry about that. My wife needed my credit card. Ah, okay. Talk to Gemara weiter.
And you ran with such gusto to give it to her. Pella in and of itself.
Okay, so let's see what we have over here. So the Gemara wants to know, we had a shayla whether or not you can bring it as a carbon. How about just using it for a mitzvah? Can you use the lulav for the mitzvah of lulav? If the tree was originally planted as an asherah, we know that asherah remains osir. It's osir bano, even for a heged. So that's not a shayla. It's osir bano. Everybody in the Mishnah agrees. You know where we would have a shayla? When it was planted, it was not planted for the purposes of avodah zara. And later on, they use it as avodah zara. And if you remember, that's what we had. Rav Sheshes learned that that's the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yosy Glili in our Mishnah. And we said that Rabbi Yosy Glili, who also holds like Rabbi Yosy Bar Yehuda, holds that if the tree was originally planted not avodah zara, and it was made avodah zara later, that whole tree is an asherah and it's also bano. But that's not our shayla, because according to him, it'll be also even lahedit. He's a boilach. Our shayla as to whether or not you're allowed to use it for the mitzvah is where lahedit was mutter. That would be a libud rabbanon who holds that since the tree was not planted originally l'avodah zara, it's not also. So we have a tree that's not also lahedit, but it's still nevad. The question is, mitzvah mai, even though it's mutter b'hana, is it appropriate to use it for the mitzvah of lulav? Mai mi moyes kalape gavoya oiloi. Is it a davar mos because it was nevad and therefore it's not appropriate to use it as a mitzvah? So kiyasher avdimi amar the asherah shabitla kamiboy. It must be speaking in a case where the asherah, the goy, was mavatlit, because if he wasn't mavatlit, it's still avodah zara. So the question is, the goy was mavatlit. Now the shayla is at one point it was also. At one point, so let's see Rashi. Rabdimi Amar. So Rabdimi wants to say it's lav davka in a case only according to the Rabbanon, where it was originally planted not for avodah zara, and then it became avodah zara. It could even be speaking in a tree that was originally planted avodah zara, and it was an isser hana. It was an isser hana. But then the goy went. It was owned by a goy because a yid can't be mevatel avodah zara, but a goy owned it, and the goy went and was mevatel the avodah zara. So now, while it was an avodah zara, it was also lehedit, and it was also surely also to be used for a mitzvah lulav. But the question is now the goy undid it. The goy was mevatel the avodah zara, so now it's mutar lehedit. So the question is, since before the goy was mevatel the avodah zara, you couldn't have used it for the mitzvah of lulav. So therefore, yesh dichu eis al mitzvahs. You say once something becomes disqualified to be used as a mitzvah, such as this lulav, you can no longer use it as a mitzvah, even if that disqualification evaporates. Or maybe ein dichu eis al mitzvahs. While it's disqualified, it can't be used. But once the goy is mevatel, you would be able to use it. So that is the shayla, according to Rav Dimi. Is there a din of dichui by mitzvahs or not? because by carbonus there's such an issue of if it was a carbon that was nitcha and then the moon went away or some other dichle went away, there's a shaila if it permanently makes it that this carbon can't be a carbon. So we're discussing the shaila of dichle legabe mitzvahs. Let's see if we could bring a riot to the shaila. Mitan we learned there's a loch of kisu adam. If somebody shechts either a chaya or an oif, he has to make kisu adam. Did you ever wonder why there's no mitzvah of kisu adam on a behema, dafka by a chaya and oif? So it's the Mefarshim tell us that the reason why there's no din kisu adam by a behema, we could figure it out from why there is a mitzvah of kisu adam b'chalal. So the Mefarshim say that the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the mitzvah of kisu adam is so that people shouldn't drink the dam. We know kedam and nefesh is an issue to eat or drink dam. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu said it's like a harchaka daraisa. It's like a gzera from the Torah itself. The Torah says cover it over with earth. Remind you you're not supposed to touch that dam. But a behema, which is normally brought on the mizbech, a behema which could be brought as a carbon, the fact that the dam is spritzed on the mizbech is enough of a simentas to make sure we stay away from eating that dam. But chay and oif, which you wouldn't be makriv on the mizbeach, you wouldn't be makriv the dam on the mizbeach. For that, we need that sign. So what happened is kiso. Someone made kiso adam. V'nisgala, and wind came, blew the sand away, and now the dam is once again exposed. Potter milachasas. You're potter from making kiso adam. Again, you did it already. Kiso ruach. What if we didn't make kiso adam? But a wind blew a whole bunch of sand over the dam, and now it's covered. Chayav l'chasas, you're still chayav to do kisi adam. The Omer Rabbi Barachan Omer Bechanon, lo yishonu ela shechazav in eskala. Cannot do kisi adam if it's already covered. But if wind covered it up, wind blew sand and covered the dam, and then wind came and blew that sand away. So now we have dam here that where the mitzvah of kisi was never done to it, and it's now niskala. That's when you're chayav to make kisu adam. What if it's still covered with sand that the wind blew on it? You're part of it making kisu adam. And the Gemara probes this halacha of Rabbi Yochanan. Ki chazav in this gala might happen. Even if it got uncovered, why would that be mechayiv you to make kisu adam? There was already a point in time where you were parted from kisu adam because the sand was covering it, and therefore hoil idchi. Since there was a point in time where you couldn't do that mitzvah because the sand was covering it, so that mitzvah is gone. That was the kasha that the Gemara asked on Rabbi Yechanan. The Amar Papa, and because of that kasha, Papa concluded, Zoy Meres, Ein Dichui Eitzel Mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are never nitcha. So Oibazoi, let's ask our shaila over here. Just like Ein Dichui Eitzel Mitzvahs. By dam that was covered by wind that blew sand on it, so too Ein Dichui Eitzel Mitzvahs, a lulav that was possible because it was Avoda Zara, and it became Ois Avoda Zara. Zok Gemara, Reish Lakish still has a very good question because there are Papa Gufay Boile. Reish Lakish wanted to have a deeper understanding of Rav Papa's conviction in his psak of Ein Dichui Eitzel Mitzvahs, and he wanted to know Mivshet Pshitale, is Rav Papa 100% sure? Mivshet Pshitale Rav Papa Ein Dichui Eitzel Mitzvahs, and therefore, if he's sure about it, Loishna Lakula Loishna Lachumra, it will apply not only Lachumra to be mechayiv this person to make kisu adam again, but it will even apply the kula to allow this lulav to be used. Oy dilma suvukim esavklei. Maybe when your papa paskin your chayiv and kisu adam, that's only uluchomer aminu. That's only because he's koishet that maybe a dichui, and therefore you haven't discharged your chayiv of the mitzvah of kisu adam. But the kula, when it's a shaila of whether or not you can use a lulav that was once part of an avodah zara, loy amrinon, maybe your papa would never say dichui esol mitzvahs, ain't dichui esol mitzvahs in that part. So tomorrow take when that was Rish Lakish shaila, this halacha of ein dichui esol mitzvahs is that a chumrah or it is even lekula because it's a sure bet. So that's the next one.
The other chiluk is that by the Kisei Adam, it was just a wind that blew it off. Here you have a goy doing something positive in the interim.
So the Rishonim speak about something similar to what you're saying. There's a very big difference. By Kisei Adam, there's no dichui. There was a period of time where you weren't able to fulfill the mitzvah. By the lulav, it was actually possible. There was actually a psul on the lulav at one time. So by lulav, there's a smart to say it's even worse.
So he's looking at it from a different angle on the soul part. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see the Gemara Vayter. As an aside note, there's a very fascinating situation. If it's mamish avodah zara, right? Let's say you have a shofar of avodah zara. Can you use a shofar of an avodah zara to be mekayim the mitzvah of shofar? You might say mitzvahs lav lehenisnit, but in fact, the reason why you cannot, I'm sorry,
it's altmos.
Well, the reason why you cannot be yotzeh the mitzvah of shofar with a shofar of avodah zara is because it's ketusei michte shiurei. The Baal shofar has to have a certain size to it, similar to a lulav. If it's asher bana, it's as if it's burnt. So it's more than just mos. It's as if you don't have a shofar here. Zog the Mishnah Berurah, if the goy was mevatel the shofar from being an avodah zara, a goy could be mevatel avodah zara, and therefore you'll be able to use it. At what point does the goy have to be mevatel the shofar? So logic would dictate before the chiyuv of shofar comes, which means before first thing in the morning on Rosh Hashanah. Zok the Mishnah Berurah, you know when the goy has to be mevatel or it's too late? He has to be mevatel before Yom Tov, before Shkia on Erev Rosh Hashanah. It's the same thing with lulav. If the lulav was an avodah zara itself, and then the goy was mevatel, the goy has to be mevatel the lulav before Shkia on Erev Sukkot. If he was mevatel once Yom Tov started, it would be too late. So the Achronim probe, I believe it's a Mechasron probe. What's going on over here? If by the time there was a chiyuv of the mitzvah, this item is for sure mutter, why wouldn't you be able to use it? The chiyuv of the mitzvah of shofar comes Shon in the morning. The chiyuv to shake the lulav comes Sukkot in the morning. So why is it a concern that it was still also about no the night before? So what the Achronim tell us is something very fascinating. That is, it's possible that the chiyuv of the mitzvah is here already, even though the ability to fulfill the mitzvah is not here. And therefore, the Minchas Chinuch must learn that the chiyuv of the mitzvah of lulav comes already Sukkot night. The chiyuv of the mitzvah of shofar comes already Sukkot night. Nervos, you can't be mekayim it yet, but the chiyuv is there. So it opens up a new concept that the chiyuv can be there even though you're not yet able to be mekayim. Okay, so let's have a look at the next Gemara Shaila. Everything's building upon what we learned until now. Boy Papa, someone bows down to a behemoth. Can you use its wool for tcheles? So this is a broad shaila. We have to drill down and clarify what exactly is it that we're looking for. First of all, tcheles tamai. Which tcheles are we talking about? Are we talking about tcheles that's considered mishamshei korban, machshirei korban, such as eat tcheles l'kayhanim? If you're referring to the tcheles in the Big Kahuna, like the me'il, which is called tcheles, or other parts of the Big Kahuna that have some tcheles mixed into it, like the choshen and the ephod. Well, hainu boy, the Rami Bar Chama, isn't that the shaila that we discussed? Yet not yesterday, but on Shabbos. Isn't that yesterday's daf, where Rami Bar Chama wanted to know that if you were oived something that was nevad b'mechuber, although it's mutabano, can you use it as machshir korban? Right? His shaila was if someone was oived a rock and then the rock was cut out, can we use that in the Beis Hamikdash? So why would Rav Papa be repeating the same shaila that Rami Bar Chama asked yesterday? And it's important to note, a live animal is like mechuber lakarka. You can't answer it. So that would be similar to the same shaila as Rami Bar Chama asked on yesterday's daf. Now, we eat tcheles letzitzis, and if the question is, can you use tcheles for the mitzvah of tzitzis? Well, hainu boy the Rish Lakish. That's exactly the shaila we have now. Is there dichui etzel mitzvahs or not? You're right. Either one of these two shilas has already been discussed, and that's not really why Rav Papa raised these issues. Rather, if that's all he wanted to know, he wouldn't have raised it because Rabbi Bechama and Rish Lakish already raised these shilas. You know why he's clearing? Because he has three other spin-off shilas that he wanted to introduce. So he started with a segue from what we were discussing, which we know has already been discussed. But then he added three more shilas. Can you use the horns of this animal for the chatzoitros? And Taisa says chatzoitros are made out of gold, silver. What are you talking about? Bones? So Rashi also says the chatzoitros that were made to gather Klal Yisrael or to motivate them in war, those are the ones that we learned in the pasuk are gold and silver. But the chatzoitros that were used as part of the orchestra when the Levim were saying Shira by the Kravas Karbonos, those were made out of bone, or they could have been made out of bone. So that's question number one. Shoikea, the thigh bones of these animals, Ma'u Lechalilin. Were you able to make flutes out of them that they would also use in the orchestra? And B'nai Me'el, and the sinews and the different fibers that they can pull out of the inside of the animal, Ma'u Lepe'eres. Can you use those as strings and harps? For harp strings or any other string instrument, can you use these parts of the animal for that? Or do you say it's mos? So if the mitzvah of shira is bedafka with a keli, it's an instrumental, it's not a cappella, it's an instrumental chiyuv, because that's mamish doing avoda, and you're surely not allowed to do avoda with that. However, what about alibid mandamar ikar shira bepeh? According to the mandamar, ikar shira is bepeh, meaning really shira is just singing. The music was just to make it nicer. Bisume kala ba'almahu. And therefore, umaysinon, therefore the fact that they were originally from Avoda Zara won't be a problem because it's not the ikar mitzvah of shira. It's just something to enhance it a little bit. Maybe they wouldn't have the most factor and you would be able to use it. Or maybe even that enhancement is also to be used if it was Avoda Zara, and that the Gemara remains with a taker. Okay, Gavalta. Zog to Gemara weiter. Boy Rava, Hameshtachave Lema'ayin. Someone who bowed down to a spring, flowing water. Mema of Ma'ul Nasah. Can you use water in Nasah? For eight Gemara, what is the shayla? When he's bowing down to the water, is he bowing down to the water or he's bowing down to the shadow of himself, the image of himself that he sees? So that's one side, and therefore the water should be mutter because he's not really serving the water. Or maybe he's bowing down to the water and the water will be also. If that is the shayla, then why is the dafka shayla of nesachim and why is the dafka shayla in a spring? Ask a simple shayla. If someone bows down to a bucket of water, is it also bana or not? Is he bowing down to the water or is he bowing down to the reflection? So that can't be the shayla. So la'olam l'mayakasot. It must be that he holds for sure when someone bows down to the water, he's not bowing down to the reflection, he's bowing to the water. So why should it be mutter? It's for sure usher. Because the kamoy osdu. The water that he bows down to, it's a rushing river. It's a rushing spring that's long gone. Right? That's why the Arizal's mikveh is always clean. It's always cold, but it's also always clean because it's rushing water. The water that the smelly guy before you, toiveled in, is a different water from that you're going to be toiveled in. So therefore, the water that you're doing avoid Zara on is no longer here. Maybe when you bow down, you're bowing down to the entire body of water, not just to the water that's in front of you. Zok Gemara. Okay, let's say that's the shayla. But why would any water be able to become usher, even if you had in mind the whole body of water? I can't bow down to a river and now everybody is usher bana on it. It's not mine, usher. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to have enough from the sun. How many people bow down to the sun? We're talking about a spring that's fully contained within his property. So it's completely private, and that's the shaila as to whether or not it would be aser bano, because the question is, what is he bowing down to? The entire body of water, or just a bit of water that's standing in front of him right now? So Shmuel shared with me a story from Stories of the Daf about an Egyptian king that was once walking with his wife through his beautiful gardens, and they had a rushing river in the garden, and she decided, you know what, it's a hot day, I want to go swim in the river. And he said, no, it's not appropriate, you should get dressed over here and jump in, don't go. And he says, I want to. And he said, I forbid you to go. And I forbid you to bathe in this water. And she ignored him, and she did. So now the question is, what does he do with her? He can't completely leave her unpunished, but on the other hand, he doesn't want to kill his wife. He's not Achashverosh, who listens to Haman to kill his wife. So he was stuck. He had to maintain some semblance of justice, but he definitely didn't want to kill his wife. He had several advisors. One of them, who was a big Rav, the big Rav said, you don't have a Shaila. Because, in fact, from the Gemara on Avoda Zara, Daf Mem Zayin, you see your wife didn't violate anything at all. Because when you forbid her to bathe in the water, you were referring to the water that you were looking at right there. When she bathed in the water, it's a completely different water because the water was moving. So the king was so happy with the loophole that this Rav found for him that he shouldn't have to kill his wife, that he got promoted. Okay, Zok der Heilige Mishnah weiter. Mi shahaya beisoy samuch lavodas kacham. What happens if someone lived in a townhouse and there was a wall of his house that also was the wall of the Avodah Zarah's house? But we're talking over here about a wall that was fully contained within his property. But so the property line, the whole thickness of the wall was within his property line, but it still acted as one of the walls to his neighbor. V'nofal, and the wall fell down. The Allah is also of noise, so he's not allowed to rebuild it, because in fact he's building a wall for the Avodah Zarah. So what should he do? He doesn't want to leave it open. Keted yaseh, koines b'soich shaloi arba amos, uboina shaloi. Uboina, comma. What he does is he can rebuild the wall, but he has to move it within his property 4 amos. So he's not building the house on the Avodah Zarah because the wall is moved over in his property. So their wall is still missing. The Ritva says 4 amos is lav dafka. It just means a significant amount. Because imagine you have a small house, moving your wall in 8 feet could destroy your whole house. So it just means it has to be relocated a significant amount so that you're definitely not building a wall for Avodah Zarah. What about shaloi v'shal avodas kacham? What if the wall was on shared property? So let's say the wall is 2 amos thick, 1 amma is on his property, 1 amma is on the Avodah Zarah's property, and this whole wall is a wall that's owned by both. So what happens if it's shaloi v'shal avodas kacham? So let's turn over onto Mem Zayin base. If it's both, then nidoin mechza al mechza. It's treated like 50-50, which means that instead of pulling in 4 amos from the surface of my wall, I only have to pull in 3 amos from the surface of my wall because 1 amma underneath the footprint of that wall is my property as well. So I just have to be 3 amos away from the location of the original wall. What about the broken pieces of wall that are here on the floor? Avonov, Eitzav, the Ofroi, they all have a din of Avodah Zarah. Because whatever was on the Avodah Zarah side is Aser Bahano. It's Avodah Zarah. And it's Metamek Sheret, Shenemer Shakich, Zakshenu. Anything that belongs to Avodah Zarah, it's an Avatuma. And if you touch it, you become a Rishon Latuma. Because that's the Tuma of a Sheret. If you touch it, you become a Rishon Latuma. And all of these walls, and you can't say, let's say that I'll take half the blocks and they're mine, and they shouldn't be Avodah Zarah. And you could take half the blocks and you'd have a problem. So Rashi can't do that because that would be Breira. How do you know that these rocks were from my side? Maybe they were from your side. So therefore, even though we built a whole wall b'shutfis, we cannot identify that any rock should be mine versus the Avodah Zarah's because of Ein Breira, so the whole wall has the din of a Tumah Sheretz. Rabbi Kiva says a Avodah Zarah is worse than a Tumah Sheretz. It's Ketumas Nido. How is Ketumas Nido any worse than a Sheretz? They're both Avatuma. The answer is very simple. In order to become Tamei from a Sheretz, you have to touch the Sheretz. But in order to become Tamei from a Nido, you can even touch a bed that she was on. Or if she's on 10 mattresses, the bottom mattress also becomes Tamei with her Rishon Latuma. So the Avodah Zarah is Tamei even b'masa. So Zokra Bekiva, it's Kanido. Shenemer, it is referring to Avodah Zarah, Tazreim, throw them away, scatter them in the wind, Kamaydova, like a woman who is menstruating, like a Nida. Say Tamalai, go, you should tell him. So we learn from that pasuk, "Manida matama b'masa, af avodas kachavim matama b'masa." So the Mefarshim speak out from here that we know that when Lavan caught up to Yaakov and he was looking for his getchke that was stolen, and Rachel had it hidden, what did she tell her father to stop him from checking through her things? She said, "Ki." What was the lashon she said? Derech noshim. Derech noshim. She's Amanida. So was that a lie? So there are those who learn, no, since she's touching an Avodah Zara, she says, I'm just like Anida, because I'm touching the Avodah Zara. So it wasn't really a lie. So David Zolti asked, maybe she was actually Anida too. Maybe she was like Anida at the time. So that could be as well. But Al Kalpanim, that's what they want to say, that Derech Noshim Li is a good description to give to an Avodah Zara. Aitana, she told her father, don't mess with me, period. And then he said, I'm staying back. Zok the Gemara weiter. Well, Frank the Gemara, how could you move your wall in 4 amos? Essentially, what you're doing is you're donating 4 amos of your property to the Avodah Zara. You can't do that. You're not giving that to the Avodah Zara. You're still going to use that place. You know what you're going to use it for? You're going to use that as your outhouse. So that's definitely not enhancing the Avodah Zara. Now they have a bathroom on their border. Frank the Gemara, how could you do that? You're going to have to leave it open to the Avodah Zara. So it's not sneeze to go to a bathroom that's completely exposed. So the Gemara, the Ovid le beis hakisei the line. No, it'll be a basic kisei that you only use at night. Frank the Gemara, that doesn't help. Because the Yamamar, who is a tsunudik person? Hanifna balayla b'mokum shenifna b'yoyim. V'afal gavda ukibda b'chederech. Miut niusa bolam evet. The problem is, a real tzenu is somebody who, even though it's dark and at night, he still will act in the same manner. So therefore, even though it's dark and it's night, you wouldn't be able to make that into a basic kisei because it would violate principle of tznius. As Rashi says, "B'makom shenifne b'yoyim shetzarich tznius b'yavla gav d'shaninu perak haroya loy tema b'makom sheyetzarich lisrach b'layla k'b'yoyim." We're not saying that you have to go as far away from civilization at night as you must do by day. Ela'ema kederech shenifne b'yoyim. The same way someone uses the bathroom by keeping himself mostly covered, those things apply by night even though nobody can see you. But mikol mokim shemamino, you do see the beina nami b'layla tznius. You see that tznius is an important factor even by night. But if it's wide open to the Avodah Zara, everyone's going to see, even though it's at night. Zok to Gemara, I have 2 eights. Either the Ovid Leila Tinoikis, you don't make a bathroom for adults, you make a bathroom for little children, little babies. That's not a concern. That's the Inami de Goder lay behizme behing. You could put up a fence, something that'll block the vision, block the sight, but you don't build a proper wall. It's still not enhancing the Avodah Zara because they have this smelly basic forest right on its border. So now the Gemara goes through a series of 2 Mishnayos that discuss different levels of how something can be affected by Avodah Zara and what the remedies could be. So the Gemara starts with Batim. Shloisha Batim Hein. There's 3 statuses of houses that became also machmas Avodah Zara. Bayis number 1 is Bayis Shabonoi Mitchila L'Avodah Zara. A house that was built L'Chatchila as an Avodah Zara, and Rashi says it wasn't built to service an Avodah Zara. That wouldn't answer. It was built to service the house. The house itself is the getchker. Now it was not serviced yet. No one was over it yet. They just built it specifically for that purpose. So the halacha is harei aser. It's aser. Therefore, if it belonged to a goy, the goy would have to be mevatel it before you would be able to use it. And if it belonged to a yid, there's no hope for it. But what if there was already a house built, and then you decided, I want to now designate this house that's already built for Avodah Zara. So what are we going to do? We're going to enhance it a little. They smeared a nice new layer of plaster. They put it on stucco to cover it over, make it look nice and fresh. And they even put special designs into the stucco. Why? To designate it for the Avodah Zarah. V'chidesh, and they made something new, good improvement to it. So the halach is it does not ask for the house at all. Rather, noitel masha chidesh. All you need to do is chip away whatever was put there for the Avodah Zarah. And Raj says this is even if Hayid did it. Even if Hayid did it, it will not ask for the house. But whatever is added to it is asur bano. That has to be totally thrown away and destroyed. If it's a yid and if it's a goyis, he could be mevatlet, but that's got to be gotten rid of, and the house remains mutter. What if he didn't even do that? What if he just hichnis l'soicha avodas kachavim boitzia? He temporarily brought a getchke into that house, and then he took it out. But the house was never designated for anything. A reisa mutter, that has no impact on the household. Amar Rav said, "Hamishtacheve lebayis asur." If you bow down to a house, it makes it asur bano. Now a house is built in; it's like mechuber, but it wasn't originally mechuber. It's comprised of, it's built up of building materials that are all started off as being tolush. So Alma, you see from Rav's psak, if something started off tolush and then you were mechaber it has a status of tolush. Otherwise, how would a house become osur bano? The house would be mechuber l'karka. The teretz is a house is not considered mechuber l'karka. But what does Rav tell us? If you built a house l'shem avodah zarah, it's not osur yet. It's also when you bow down. So frek the Gemara v'anan bonitna. Our mission is much more machmer. It says if you merely built a house for the avodah zarah, that in itself would make it osur. So according to Rav, it's tafka by mishtachave. Zok the Gemara, it's two things. Bonoi aval b'shaloi ishtachave. Our mission is telling you a chiddush that if you merely built a house by avodah zarah, even though you never actually served it as an avodah zarah, it's still going to be osur bano. But it's another chiddush. Rav's coming to tell us that even though a house was not built for avodah zarah, but someone bound down to it, it'll still be awesome. So, for Gemara, why does our Mishnah list of three categories of a house for avodah zarah? There's actually a fourth category, and that is Rav's case. Gemara, it depends what your perspective is. If you're looking at different ways for houses to become osur b'avodah zarah, you're right. There are four methods, but that's not what we're focusing. We're focusing in our Mishnah on how to mevatel the avodah zarah, so you can use the items. Legabi that, there's no difference if you bow down to the house or if you built it. The way to discharge it is only if it belonged to a goy and he could be mevatlet. But if it belonged to a yid, he could never be mevatlet. So legabi discharging the iser, they have the same halacha. Kivan the linyan bittel. Bana v'ishtacha v'chad, even bana v'ishtacha is one thing. So chad the Mishnah refers to it under one category because the way to undo the Torah avodah zarah from it, or whether it's undoable, is one halacha, whether it was bana or ishtach.
Silly question. How are you mishtachah alpha b'shaloi bana?
The house was built not l'shem avodah zarah. And then the owner went and bowed down to his house after he built it, not l'shem avodah zarah. Similar to the Asherah case, where you planted it not for an Asherah, and then you bowed down to it later.
Because it wasn't built with that in mind?
That's correct. It was not built with that in mind, and later on he decided he wanted to serve it. And that's the chiddush of Rav. Right now, it's mechuber l'karka. You're bowing down to it when it's already completely built. But Rav says since it originally started with tolush, with building materials, even now that it's built in, it's not considered mechuber l'karka. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Shalosh avodim. There's three statuses of stones l'gabe Yisrael. One is even shechotzva metchila lebimus. If you quarried a stone lechatchila that it should be the base, the pedestal for the avodah zarah, that stone is osur harezu asura. And therefore, the same thing like a house. If it's a goyz, he would have to be mevatel it, and if it's a yid, it'll be osur forever. What about if there was already an existing stone, but you wanted to improve it, redecorate it, to dedicate it towards the avodah zarah? Saida v'chayda l'shem avodas kachavim. So once again, as we said earlier, it doesn't asur the stone itself. The only thing that's asur is the add-on. So even if it's a Jew who did it, it doesn't asur the stone. It only asurs the extra additives that he did, and therefore noitel masha sayid v'chayid muteris. get rid of all the stuff that was there for Avodah Zara. If it's a Yid, destroy it. If it's a Goy, he has to be Mevatl it, and this stone is mutter. What about merely Hamid Allah Avodah Kachav V'Silka? You put a Getchka on it, then you took it off, then Areiz Muteris, that never became Usr in the first place. Gebalti. Amar Abami. This halacha that we're saying that the side is Usr and it has to be cut off, that's Vahusha side, Bechayid, Begufa Shalev. It's not enough just to smear something on it. That wouldn't make it into an Avodah Zarah. It's only an Avodah Zarah if you actually drilled into the stone and there were crevices in the stone and you had your side and chayit penetrate the stone, internal to the stone, that's when it would become Avodah Zarah. How could you say that's Pshat Rabami? Our Mishnah about Avodim is really a parallel Mishnah to the earlier case of houses. Our Mishnah is literally a parallel in the Mishnah to the previous Mishnah. Ubayis lav b'gufeyu umitzerei umitzer kama. In the house, when you're smearing it, you're not drilling into the brick to inject plaster in the brick. It's just it's a covering over it, and yet that covering still becomes osir. So why should a rock be any different? Dr. What are you talking about? Bayis nami ika beini urve. The house, we also have sid that gets inside to it. Because what do you think goes in between the bricks? The sid gets in between the bricks. So that's just like penetrating inside the rock. That's not what we're talking about. Because this is a completed house. A completed house that was already plastered, and now you're putting another layer of plaster on it. Milo yaskinim the shaya b'hadar shaya. That means you're putting the layer of plaster on after it's already been plastered. So your second layer of plaster will not penetrate the brick. They're just a decorative cover to it. Yet, it still has it in a visor. So why by a rock does Rabami say it has to penetrate? Ella, Rabami never said it has to penetrate. Even if it's on the rock, not penetrating, it's also you got to chop it off. What was Rabami referring to when he said Vushasai Bekayid? What Rabami is saying is even Linyan Bittel, you could still just take it off and it'll be good enough. Let's say you actually injected the sid into the Evan, you drilled a hole, it's mamish penetrated the Evan, or even by a house, if it's mamish penetrated, you might think that now it ashers the whole rock. Kamash malon, if you just take out whatever sid you put in, it'll be fine, and we won't look at it like it sort of reforms the block. The mountain hema, keeping shasai bechayit, begufa shel Evan, ke'evan shechotzva mitchila la'avodas b'cham dami. You might think that if you might drill the hole in the rock and you inject it inside the rock, sid, it's as if you're quarrying the rock from scratch for Avodah Zarah. The titz or kula, the whole rock should be osir. The mashallah, no matter how you apply that sid, get rid of the sid, the rock is mutter. So what were you saying?
I was saying is that the Gemara uses the word of bitlo, which is more applicable to a goy. By a yid, what we talked about earlier was that he has to remove it.
That's right. A yid, anything that a yid answers will never become mutter. You have to destroy it.
Correct. So does he have to, if he drilled holes in the sid and he injected that plaster that he used for Avodah Zarah for that interim time, is it enough? Because the word of
it will not answer the rock, but all of the sid has to be completely removed. And if he's a yid, the sid that's removed has to be destroyed. And if it's a goy, the sid that was removed has to be mevatla.
Right, but
the main thing is it won't, even though it penetrated the rock, the isser won't penetrate the rock.
Right, because it's only words, so it's just or it's actions. He just says, "I'm mevatla this avodah zarah." So it's much.
But
easier.
No, the yid can't be mevatla.
I understand.
The yid has to get rid of everything that he did there.
That's what I'm saying. The Gemara uses the word of bittel. We're talking about bittel, whether or not the second layer of plaster has penetrated the rock, whether or not that would be enough to undo the bittel. So when it comes to bittel, it's bittel. The whole thing is mevatel.
So you're saying bittel is really, technically, bittel is really a term that should only be used when we're talking about a goy, because a yid can never be mevatel.
Correct.
Bittel is being used a little bit loosely to say that we're undoing a bad situation, but it's not technically bittel.
Right, because the yid's gonna have to drill into those sid and remove all those pieces.
That's right.
Regardless.
Yeah, right. So the bittel here means like bittul chametz. It means like burning the chametz. It's not changing his status like a goy could do. Okay, gewaltig. Okay,
How was
shkoyach.
your
Everybody
trip?
should have an awesomely wonderful day.
How
Thank
was your
you.
trip?
Enjoy your nafis.
Would you believe on the way driving yesterday, I actually had to turn the heat on? In the
Wow.
Poconos, it was 16 degrees.
Think, Yossi, that has double dual meaning, doesn't it? The heat was on, right?
For those in the know.
Did you make it to Scranton?
I no, not only about I made it just to a rest area about a half hour north of Scranton, but 10 minutes before the fast was over, before I broke my fast, I was found to have been driving too fast.
Oh yeah.
So I learned my lesson. Just because you're following a whole bunch of people speeding, it doesn't mean they're going to get the guy in front of you. They can get you even though you're in the back. Now I also I should have had Waze on. Waze would have warned me.
They get the guy with the Canadian plates.
You didn't
Yeah,
tell
and
him
you
it's
think-
a fast day. It's a fast day.
Yeah, I figured I'd just keep my mouth shut, took the ticket, and I'll have to plea it out. Okay, have an awesome, wonderful day.
Enjoy.